Yeah, I've been Darkest Dungeon too. How could you tell? Is it because I got attacked by wasps in Animal Crossing and there was a brief moment where I thought I would get a blight token up on my character? Or is it because when I walked outside and reached out to touch grass, it died before my hand got to it? This is definitely an interesting game to review. On one hand, I feel like I'm going to do it injustice in this video by passing over some of the very niche, great details that weren't in the first game, but on the other hand, I feel like it does itself a lot of injustices, which makes it hard for me to support it adequately. But let's start with the most impressive thing it has managed to pull off. This is an intelligence-based game, but a lot like Elden Ring or any well-made challenging game, it convinces your brain to exert itself and perform at its highest capacity because of this difficulty. I've already talked about how difficulty in video games can motivate players to try harder, but I haven't mentioned the similar effects risk can have. The difference is one of those relies on skill, and the other one relies on chance. Personally, I feel significantly worse when I lose to RNG. This game is chock full of RNG, by the way. There's just so much to have to consider. In 11 highly varied characters, 12 if you include the bounty hunter, there are 11 different abilities for each, of which there are 3 different dot tokens, 6 common applicable debuffs, 7 applicable buffs, and a ton of different resistances. The order of which your characters are in the lineup restrict their access to certain moves, and each move can attack either multiple side-by-side enemies or a single enemy depending on where they are on their side of the battlefield. There are critical attacks and different regions which may be favorable to certain characters over others. You think balancing a competitive FPS game is hard? Try balancing Darkest Dungeon's classes. But somehow, the most impressive part is that still, it feels like the 5, 10, 15% better you get after every attempt can make the game up to 200% easier. Until of course you reach a skill cap, which is just barely under the skill level you need to beat this boss. But honestly, the thing that makes this boss unacceptably difficult besides its insurmountable strength, what? Is that the quote-unquote runback is 2 hours long. That isn't the only brick wall in question. There are encounters that are almost as agonizing. The cannon is the greatest example. On your 2-hour run back to the Eye of Sauron, you may randomly encounter this enemy, which will also just one-shot your entire team. For these specific instances, unfortunately, you do require a certain amount of luck, which is a bit of a shame if you focus on it hard enough to hurt yourself. For the lore, I mean, honestly, nobody really cares about any of that stuff, but I did notice that at one point the narrator ran out of starting voice lines, and it was at that point I realized that I'd been playing this game for far too long.
Fight through the fatigue.
And that is saying something because the narrator is just as essential and amazing as he was in the previous game, but he still uses that same confusing vocabulary that you never use in real life.
Steel yourself. The conflagration.
Sluice.
So, as he proves himself to be quite the linguist, it was unsteadying to hear him repeating himself.
Not bad for a dead guy, huh?
The story is actually pretty lame. It's basically just a fight against your inner demons, but it is accompanied by some beautiful cinematics and great storytelling on the part of the narrator, obviously. I just wish they spent a bit more time with it. It feels kind of rushed. The ending bosses of each act are boring. The Eye was actually the most original one, and yet still it feels too difficult for anyone to completely accept. The ending boss is just 2 previous bosses, and the Eye still one-shots you. If you balance them out by considering how much time should have been spent on both of them, the common enemies are actually more diverse and interesting than the bosses. I honestly haven't played many roguelites, not including Darkest Dungeon 1 or 2. I can think of like maybe 6 or 7 right now, but I can't say I'm disappointed in the sequel. These 2 games are completely different, and both are equally entertaining. If I could expect this performance from any roguelite, I would have a lot more to compare in this video, but unfortunately, Hades is probably not a solid enough comparative foundation to present arguments. All I can say for now is I enjoyed it, I'd recommend it, and turn on hacks once you reach the focus vault.